In this day and age, there are so many different mediums of storytelling. Whether you write a book, create an animation, or make a film, there's so many different ways you can tell somebody a story. In recent years, video games have floated to the top as one of the best mediums to do this with. When something's interactive, you can involve your audience in a much deeper and personal way, make them feel like they're part of the story, filling the shoes of the main character. Or perhaps you'll uncover it in a more unconventional way, piecing together the bigger picture as you explore and digest the world around you. But what if? What if you could tell a story through a game that did not exist? A story that may or may not be about the person playing? What if you could combine these mediums, the medium of video games with the medium of filmmaking? A web series under the guise of a video game let's play, when in actuality, the game is fabricated, the player is fabricated, but the story it tells feels very real. The game in question is called Petscop. It's a fictional PS1 game that was made up for a web series of the same name. It launched just last year in March of 2017, and it's still ongoing, updating every 2 to 4 months. The premise is nothing new. Somebody finds an old game they loved as a kid, and they play it again only to find unsettling things within it. One of the most popular examples of a web series like this was Ben Drowned, which was achieved by using emulator codes to create strange effects and scenarios. But despite treading familiar territory, there's a lot that makes Petscop unique. The first and most obvious thing is that Petscop is not a real game. This game you watch him play was something built from the ground up just for this series. I had a friend show me the series about a month ago, and I got so sucked into it that I ended up watching a whole thing in one sitting. And then I watched it all again, and then I watched it all again. So, since it's the Halloween season, I thought it would be maybe kind of cool to talk about it a little bit. Not just about the theories like all the other channels seem to do. I also want to dive more so into the production of it as well. There's already a lot of videos about the series up on YouTube, and from what I've heard, a lot of them just retread familiar territory. So to try and avoid that, I'm not going to be talking about the most well-discussed and popular theories and tidbits like the whole thing with Candace Newmaker. Just not even going to bother with that, because I feel like anyone who cares about the series probably already knows about the stuff like that. That, and to assure that my theories are entirely my own original theories that have not been influenced by other videos, I actually have not watched a single video about Petscop. I've only watched the series and that's it. So, with that said, why don't we get started?
Alright, so, this is just to, prove to you that I'm not lying about this game that I found.
On March 12th of 2017, a user simply named Petscop uploaded a video simply titled Petscop, the description saying nothing more than a game I found. It follows a guy named Paul who claims to have rediscovered an unreleased PS1 game he somehow had when he was a child.
The game is apparently unfinished because there's nothing over here.
The video is recorded as a casual walkthrough with commentary, as if intended for a handful of Paul's close friends. It's uploaded to YouTube simply so we can show it to them. And it all looks legit. From the splash screen of the company name, to the title screen, to the gameplay, to the menus, the sound effects, even the loading screens, all the way down to the quality of the footage, looking like it was actually recorded off of an actual PS1. Even the character you play as, it all reminds me of those cute little oddball Japanese games you'd see between the late 90s and the mid 2000s, games like Chulet or Katamari. This looks like it could have been a real game that actually got released around this time. At its core, Petscop is a game that has you looking for different pets at a care center called Even Care, solving puzzles in order to collect them. Even Care is in the gift plane, this cutesy little white area with a bunch of presents everywhere. And these are real puzzles he's actually solving to get these pets. One involves opening and closing a gate, one has you using this treadmill to create clones of yourself, and this one has you using a bucket to catch the rain from a cloud. I was floored by how real this game looks. There's plenty of examples of genuinely good game design here too. Take this pink block for example. It obscures the collectibles down the way so the player will walk to the right before seeing them, but Paul, being somebody already familiar with the game, walks down and grabs them before the screen scrolls. This is something that's here to make the game both convincing in its design, but also to make it convincing to the viewer that this is something that Paul has simply played before. And this room, the cloud is at the dead center of the screen, and the amount of time it takes for your character to walk to it is exactly the same amount of time it takes for the cloud to move, as if the game is meticulously designed to give the player all all of the visual information they need to understand the puzzle by the time they get to it. Whoever made this clearly has some sort of background in game design, whether they studied it in school or they simply have experience making games before, or they've, I don't know, watched a lot of behind the scenes or something. Whatever it was, this guy knew exactly what he was doing. And not only is just the game convincing as something that could have been real, but Paul's reaction to it is as well. There's a pet he can't even figure out how to get, and his reaction to that just seems really genuine.
Okay, over here, I can't catch this one. I've tried. This is always what happens. So I don't know what's up with that one.
Paul then reads a note that he claims came with the game. It describes a strange cryptic scenario, walking downstairs and becoming a shadow man. Also attached is a button combination that must be used in a certain room to unlock the rest of the game demo. So, like anybody else would, Paul walks into the corresponding room and enters the button combination. And then this is where things start to get strange.
Down, right, start. Alright?
Leaving even care now brings Paul to a dark and desolate field of grass, polar opposite to what we've previously seen in every possible way. Green being the opposite color to pink, the graphics being detailed and realistic instead of flat shaded and cartoony, and of course, most obviously, the game being dark and spooky instead of bright and cheery. After walking around aimlessly for what Paul claims to be is more than an hour, he discovers a wooden hatch. With no idea how to open it or what to do next, Paul asks the audience to leave their ideas in the comment section, and then he ends the video. Over the next year, the video would receive over 1 million views and would kickstart one of the most fascinating rabbit holes the internet has ever seen. Between then and now, Petscop would upload 14 additional episodes. As of this video, there's 15 in total, each one following Paul as he gets further and further into the game, having him solve cryptic puzzles, bear witness to things both strange and unsettling, and have the game act as if it's trying to communicate with him, sometimes through text that appears to be aimed at somebody.
This part of the game was made for somebody to see.
Or this statue that you can ask questions. After what appears to be some sort of texture glitch that turns it pink, it stops giving Paul the programmed answers and starts to speak as if it has a mind of its own.
So that's not what it said before when I put in that question.
But perhaps the most direct way it's communicated was through the other players, the most frequently recurring one being a green character named Marvin. Well, at least that's what we believe his name is based on the information the game has given us. We only ever see dialogue from Marvin in the game's demo. You know, like when you leave a game running at the title screen and eventually it plays a demonstration. Some recordings up on the channel are of the game's demo instead of Paul playing it himself. And here's where things start to get interesting. It seems as if Paul's button inputs in the main game affect that of the demo. This is acknowledged and shown in detail for the first time when Paul tries to get the demo version of himself into a room that's only open in the demo so he can grab an item. He overlays the footage to show him in real time and him in the demo. At least I think that's what's going on. He describes it as pretending, like he's pretending the door is actually open and he goes in despite what's being shown on screen. I'm not really entirely sure, honestly. There's so much to digest here, it'd be impossible to cover it all, but I'm not here to tell you the whole story, just my own 2 cents. But firstly, I'd kind of like to take a look at the production of the game. Like, how did he make this, and why does it look so convincing? From emulating the limitations of the hardware all the way down to the analog look of the video quality. Having the game actually run on official hardware, though, seems a little far-fetched to me, especially if we're assuming that he's constantly making changes to the game as he makes more episodes. So here's my theory as to how he achieved this composite look. I would assume that the game was made for PC, and then he records it simply in a window on his desktop and makes sure it has that proper low resolution to best emulate that jaggy PS1 look. The recording would be then put on a USB stick and then played off of something like a PS3 or Xbox 360, something that can play back footage but is also natively compatible with composite video. He would then re-record the footage in its composite quality back into a game capture device like an Elgato or something. I decided to try this out myself with some Ape Escape footage that I recorded through my HD upscaler. It looks real clean, sharp edges and everything, almost like it's being emulated. I put the footage on a USB stick, played it back through a PS3 via composite video into an Elgato, and voila! It looks just like it was recorded off a PS1, jittery colors and everything. This seemed to me like the most likely way he did it. Well, at least it did until I played the Petscop fan recreation. Seconds into booting this thing up, I noticed that they had this composite composite filter over the gameplay in real time, replicating the look of the videos without the need for real composite video. I figured if there's anybody who could tell me how this guy probably made this game, it'd be the guys behind this fan remake, so I hit them up on Discord and they were nice enough to help me out. The guy in charge of the project is a user called BubbleDerp, who shared with me game assets, a brief rundown on how his version was built, and some estimates on how Petscop was made. BubbleDerp told me that he thinks it's likely that Petscop was made in some sort of game engine, but it's possible that it was programmed from scratch as well. Now, the composite shader was programmed by a user called Red. He explained to me that he achieved the effect by breaking it down into 5 components: horizontal blur, color blur, fringing, scanlines, and edges. He was nice enough to send me an old build of a Petscop remake running in Unity. Here you can turn the shaders off, letting you see what the game would look like with clean edges. But he tells me he doesn't believe the composite effects in Petscop are real ones. They've taken a thorough look at them, and they believe that they were synthesized, either via programming like they did for the fan remake, or by using some sort of filter applied through a program like After Effects, or a media front end like RetroArch, which allows you to play anything through it with any of several built-in filters applied over it. For comparison's sake, I've compiled 4 different versions of the filter. Here's the original Petscop footage from the web series, here's the filter on the fan-made remake in GameMaker, here's the closest filter I could find in RetroArch, and here's a version I created myself by recording the build with no filters and then running it through real composite video. Whichever method was most likely used, well, I'll leave that up to you guys. There's no way to know for sure, so all we can do is speculate. But composite filter aside, it's most likely the game was made in some sort of publicly accessible engine. When I asked what his build was made in, BubbleDerp told me, "I've been using GameMaker Studio 1.4, but it's possible it could have been made in Unity or Godot. Honestly though, any engine that can emulate the PS1 is a possible candidate." Regardless of what kind of modern programming Petscop was made in, the creator seems to have a thorough understanding of what is and isn't doable on the PlayStation 1. When I asked about staying true to the hardware, I was told there doesn't seem to be any RNG anywhere, and they haven't used more than one light source at all times, purely to comply with the PlayStation's capabilities. Aside from emulating just the PS1 look, there also doesn't seem to be a single thing in Petscop that could go beyond what the PS1 would actually be capable of. Whoever made this, they certainly understood the hardware. Man, seeing how much work went into this game really makes me hope that we'll see an official playable build of it someday, but an equal amount of work has also gone into the cryptic story the series has to tell. Every line of dialogue, every reaction to the game that Paul delivers.
That's a dead kid.
Every single last thing about Petscop seems deliberate in one way or another. The signs posted in Even Care, for example, even before the game gets creepy, they allude to the game's theme of adoption and rebirthing. When you're choosing a pet, find somebody that you like. You don't have to love them right away. Interpret pets as adoptive parents and you've suddenly got a complex allegory deep-rooted in real-world events. This line would be meaningless to most, but to those familiar with the story of Candace Newmaker, it's probably pretty chilling. Link that with how you capture that first pet. You trick it into a false sense of safety by manipulating the gates, its home. That's pretty dark. How this all links to the bigger picture though, well, I'm not gonna get too specific. Like I've said, I'm not here to simply re-explain the entire story. I feel like that kind of ruins the fun. Like, I feel like the point of a web series like this is to watch it all on your own and then think of theories with your friends and talk to others and figure things out. I feel like having a whole YouTube video just telling you how it goes kind of ruins all the fun. But with that said, I still have a couple of theories that I'd like to dish out myself, so the rest of the video is probably not going to mean a whole lot to people who haven't watched the whole series in its entirety yet. Yeah, this is just going to be rapid fire nonsense. This is probably going to be very incoherent, but I'm going to try my best. So, from my understanding, this is Tiara and this is Marvin. There's a lot of little clues that hint at what applies to who and who's speaking when certain text appears. The game has several ways of communicating, sometimes through in-game dialogue that seems to be aimed at a specific real-world individual, sometimes by character dialogue, and sometimes by bizarre messages, almost as if it's from a ghost in the machine. What Paul says right here is very interesting.
This game is trying very hard to make it seem like there's an entity in it. Like a ghost
I find this line interesting because that's just what every other creepypasta game thing does. There's a ghost in the game. It's just so freaking easy, and everybody does it. And I'd like to give this series way more credit than that. The production value, the way everything connects so well, everything in this series feels, like I've said before, deliberate. So I feel as if this line, too, is deliberate. There has to be a reason why he said that. And that's why I think this line is a red herring. I mean, why would he acknowledge that if that was the big thing we were trying to figure out? A ghost in the game, really? He didn't put all of this work into the series just so there could be a ghost in the game, just like every other frickin' creepypasta out there. Not a chance. There is not a ghost in the game, but the game definitely knows things one way or another. It has characters that speak, act a certain way, and these characters, again, feel like they represent real-world people. So here's my theory. I think these people in the game are people that have played the game before. Since the game records your actions and plays them in the demo, well, what if those other characters recorded the actions of others who played this game? Like the game keylogged every button push as they played and created a character based on them. Somehow. This would explain why Marvin only speaks during the demo, because it's using inputs that somebody put into this game at some point in time. I think the game was originally intended for Marvin. In Petscop 3, Paul says the note in the bedroom is intended for somebody. Certain characters have certain text colors associated with them, and in later episodes, you'll see that Marvin's text color is green. This note has words spoken by the person it's written to in green, so when it says, "You said that's a puzzle," the "you" in this case must be Marvin. In Petscop 9, the note in the bedroom describes a scenario that happened in 1977. I believe this note is also addressed to Marvin. Marvin, his best friend, and her sister all visited a windmill. Her sister then took a photograph, and afterwards, Marvin's friend and the windmill both vanished. It then says that Marvin married his friend's sister, and they had a child who was Marvin's missing friend, but reborn. Now, anybody familiar with Petscop theories probably knows about the recurring theme of being reborn. I'm not going to get super far into that, but essentially what I think is that Marvin's friend disappeared at that windmill, and he believes that the child he had with his missing friend's sister is in some way or another his missing friend. There's a scene in Petscop 11 where Marvin breaks in and kidnaps Care. Petscop 9 explains that Care escaped the school's basement. In Petscop 2, exploring the basement, you can find a note that says Care has left the room, which is identical to the text that occurs when Marvin kidnaps Care. When looking at the calendar, Paul notices that the green area might represent when Care was missing, so I think this line of text marks the disappearance and the reappearance of Care. I mean, it makes sense. She disappeared when Marvin kidnapped her, and she reappeared when she escaped the basement. My guess is that Marvin kidnapped Care and brought her to the school's basement. This is why she went missing, and then she was found after escaping that basement. I think Marvin was trying to rebirth Care back into his missing friend. This is assuming that Care is Marvin's daughter. The green objects paired with the yellow and blue objects in this house that Care lives in, that makes me think that 3 people live here. Care, the yellow, Marvin, the green, and Jill, the blue, who is Marvin's wife, which we find out from a conversation in Petscop 14. Now, Petscop 5 has the pink text asking you to turn the PlayStation off after Paul asks who Tiara is. The pink text then claims that Marvin uses the tool to hurt her. During the demo sequence of Petscop 11, the character aimlessly walks around until the green tool floats around the screen, and then the character will walk in that direction. I believe this is Marvin using the tool to show the player where to go. In Petscop 15, which is the last thing that was uploaded to the channel by the time I put this video out, Marvin introduces the player to Tiara. Well, Marvin claims it's Belle, but she seems to think she's Tiara. I believe that Marvin was trying to rebirth Belle into Tiara as practice before doing the same to Care, but that didn't work out. It would also explain the whole thing with the instrument. You know, if she played it right, she would have become Tiara, but she didn't, yada yada yada. Now Tiara, or Belle, or whatever you want to call her, she gives the player access to the game's tile sheet where you can then draw on it with a pink marker, and that'll show up on the textures in-game. I think this confirms that all of the pink text has been Tiara writing stuff on the textures to communicate to the player. She colored the red tool pink and replaced the texture of dialogue that normally shows up in the game with what she wanted to say instead. Which is also why that text takes longer to appear than normal, because she has to take the time to write it all in. In Petscop 14, we have this unsettling conversation between yellow text and blue text. The yellow text is Care, and I believe the blue text is Care's mother, Marvin's wife. This conversation seems to be happening after Care returns home after going missing. Though in the conversation, Care doesn't seem to recognize the blue text as her mother, calling her Jill instead of Mom, as if Care was rebirthed back into Marvin's friend, who obviously would recognize Jill as her sister instead of her mother, which is why she's calling her Jill and not Mom. Now, the way Paul talks about this character in the game that goes missing, he says his birthday is the exact same and that he doesn't remember somebody going missing. I think Care is supposed to represent Paul somehow, as if Paul was the one who went missing. I mean, what if he doesn't remember somebody going missing because he's the one who went missing?
I don't remember knowing her at any point.
I'm thinking there's some sort of parallel world here, like the demo is one world and the main game is another, maybe two different moments in time or something like that. There's even a direct instance where you see Paul getting a glimpse of that world in Petscop 11. He enters the bathroom, and after triggering the Christmas cutscene, he then walks into this white cube which triggers demo footage. After the demo, we then cut back to Paul playing, who again enters the bathroom and once again triggers the Christmas cutscene, except this time it's being played backwards, and then we hear him say he swore he just saw a white cube. What if, despite the recording, this is what Paul actually saw?
The hell? That was an experience. Huh. Hey. I could have sworn I just saw above the bathtub those white blocks with the symbols on them.
The inputs in these two scenes are identical, but one ends and one continues, as if for a brief moment he was twice at once, and then one ended. What if he somehow switched between two different versions of the game, perhaps two different moments in time in the game? This could possibly explain why he's unknowingly playing during the demo screen in Petscop 13.
You know, it probably has to do with the thing on the tool on the road.
I'm sure a lot of people have noticed this. In that episode of Petscop, he's playing during the demo, and he's still narrating, and he doesn't acknowledge it, as if he doesn't even realize where he got to. Now, what does this all mean? I don't know. Like, what? I'm not smart enough to figure all this out. I just know there's a bunch of stuff that seems connected. I don't know what it means. What are you looking at me for? I don't have the answers. I don't freaking know, dude. With the series still ongoing, it's impossible to come to any real conclusions. There's a million different ways to look at this, and it seems no matter how much I piece together, I always end up hitting a wall some way or another. Every time I think I'm another step closer, I still feel miles away. Whichever way you look at it, there's a lot to digest here, and we won't have all of the pieces to the puzzle until the series is finally finished, and there's no telling how many more episodes have yet to come out. But whether you're watching it for the ambitious story or simply as an interesting experiment, having somebody play a creepy PS1 game they made, it's an extremely entertaining series. Whether you're this guy or you're this guy, it's still a good watch. It's genuinely creepy even on its own. There's no jump scares or loud noises, just strange things that don't utter a word. It's a very quiet game filled with droning ambience. Fun fact, some of that ambience is room tone of a busy crowd slowed down a bunch, so there's a good way to get some ambience if you ever need some. Petscop is a brilliant web series. Every last detail feels entirely deliberate. Looking back on stuff like Ben Drowned, it just feels like the creative process behind that was like, oh, wouldn't it be scary if this happened? Wouldn't it be cool if we did this? Almost as if he just kind of made it up as he went along, but Petscop feels so much more delicately constructed, as if he knew the full story from day one and then carefully sprinkled the clues across the entire series as he made it. Petscop is an incredibly ambitious project, and it certainly has taken its time. It's not a series that uploads very often, but with each and every episode comes a dump truck load of new info to work with. It's a really exciting series to get into, and the fan discussion it spawned is just awesome. Before we end the video, I'd really like to give a huge shout out to Bubble Derp and everybody else involved in the Petscop fan-made remake. Links to that project and the people behind it are all down below in the description. There's even a playable build if you want to check that out. It's been really awesome talking to these guys and seeing how passionate this community is about this thing. I tell you, man, I just really love seeing people getting together and interacting because of something like this. Like, it's been a while since I've seen something with such a ridiculously passionate fan community. And I mean, like, it's one thing when something great gets fans together and talking to each other, but when there's a mystery to solve, there's so much to talk about.